So thank you everybody for coming out. Really happy that you all can make it here tonight. I know there's lots of meetings, lots of charity events every night. I know I'm at it and I see many of you all at them too. So thank you for taking the time to come out and be with us. I'm Tracy Marra. I'm state representative in Darien and Norwalk. Tom O'Day is here now in Darien with us. We've had a little bit of redistricting, so we used to have Matt Blumenthal here in Darien, and he is now in Stanford, and we have Tom. So lovely to have Tom here in Darien, and thank you, New Canaan, for coming down and being with us. I think what we will do tonight, we're going to start off, and Tom and I are going to go through some of the bills that we're seeing coming from committees. Right now we're in the process of, we finished up all of our committees. Behind the scenes things are happening with some of the bills, and then we're going to start session tomorrow. So, and we don't know our agenda for tomorrow yet.
So tomorrow is supposed to be judges, so I don't know if any of you experiencing any of the civil or criminal law system, or if there are attorneys out there, you would know we're down a lot of judges. So tomorrow we're going to be debating and voting on a few judges in committee, and then we were supposed to be doing them in the session to get them through, but they don't have time. So we're going to be doing some fairly innocuous bills tomorrow, and then we'll address the judges and get going next week. Probably 2 days a week starting next week. Then it'll be 3 days a week the week after that, and then it'll be just about every day the last 5 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks.
So I think we can keep things pretty casual here, but after Tom and I go through some of our bills, we're going to bring up a couple folks about and do a deep dive into some of the housing issues, and then we'll leave plenty of time at the end for some question and answer as well. So,
all right. So to start, when I was campaigning, really the two biggest issues were local control of education and housing. So the 830G, that was number one. And number two, more broadly, was, frankly, the budget. Okay, so some of you may remember in 2017, we passed our bond covenants, which basically required us to spend no more than we had, pay down the debt, and not borrow more than we could afford. So those three covenants, the spending cap, the borrowing cap, and the volatility cap is what money paying down the debt, all got put in place in our 2017 budget, which was based on our Republican budget. And that, from 2017 on, we've had budget surpluses. We hadn't had budget surpluses for over 20 years. And so that budget of 2017 fixed things going forward. Now, those bond covenants were only good for 5 years. We tried to make them 10, and the compromise was 5 years. So they were expiring this June. And those were the key to why we were able to have budget surpluses. And they were going to expire. We tried to get them extended last session, and the majority party voted against every time. Well, the governor adopted that program, and we got that passed actually about a month ago now. So that was one of my top priorities. So those covenants, the bonding cap, the spending cap, and the volatility cap all got put into place for another 5 to 10 years. So that's a great thing, because now we're not going to be in constant borrowing deficit mode. Then the 830G, the affordable housing, Tracy, myself, and a number of Republicans, we put in a lot of ideas. None of them got a public hearing, unfortunately. I'm going to let Alexis and Maria Weingarten talk about 169, and they've been doing an amazing job on housing. So they're going to come up here in a little bit and talk about that. So those two things are obviously top priorities: housing, local control of education and housing, and the budget. We are going through, or the bond covenants, we are going through now the budget process. The Republicans, we're going to be putting out our budget, probably we're going to be doing tomorrow, but the office that does all the numbers, the nonpartisan office, got delayed in getting us back some information. So our budget is probably going to come out on Friday, and then we're going to do a press conference on Monday on it. So the good news is the governor has adopted a lot of our proposals, so there is going to be a tax cut. That's the good news. The bad news is it's not a big tax cut. The governor's proposing $600 million in tax cuts. Republicans are proposing $600 million for the governor's budget. Ours is about $1 billion in tax cuts. We're hoping to have somewhere closer to ours in tax cuts. The lowest two income tax rates is currently 3% and 5%. Is going down to 2% and 4.5%, according to the governors. We want it to go down even more, but we'll see. So that's kind of the broad thing, what's going on. The big thing coming up is the budget. We do 2-year budgets. The governor's proposal is to go to $51 billion for a 2-year budget, which would be an increase of over 5% in our spending, which we think is a bad idea. To give you some context, back in 1990, when we implemented the income tax, our overall budget was about $3 billion. It's now, per year, it's now 22, going to roughly $25.5 billion. So the growth of government has been exponential because those caps, those spending caps that were supposed to be implemented in 1990s weren't implemented until 2017 budget. So you saw the state government explode. So that's the reason why that's happened. Happy to answer any questions, but those are kind of the broad, big things that we have going on. I've got about 30 pages of good bills and bad bills that I certainly can answer for you, but I didn't want to bore you to death. I was going to have Tracy go through some things, maybe less boring than what I just did. And I will say one other thing. Tracy and I just met with a family on the Merit. As you all probably have recognized, between 95 and the Merit, Eversource and DOT have been clear-cutting a lot of trees. Now, I will admit they didn't do enough trimming. If you all remember the power outages that have been happening because of trees falling on lines and whatnot. And you may remember about 10 years ago, a family was killed on the Merit when they were driving in a tree with snow on it, fell on the family and killed them. And they won roughly $10 million from the state because of that. So DOT and Eversource have been looking for reasons why to clear cut. And they got those reasons, right? And unfortunately, they did it in a fairly big way, so that this family Tracy and I just visited a couple hours ago, they went from having a pretty quiet area, even though it was next to the Merit, because they had a lot of trees and shrubs and stuff, and it got basically all taken away. And the DOT is working essentially from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., and it's very loud. We've got video and audio of it. So if you're experiencing that, Tracy and I have supported a bill requiring DOT and Eversource to replant when they deforest like that for screening purposes. The problem is it's very expensive. They put a high dollar figure on the cost of it to try and kill it before it ever gets a chance to be argued on the floor. So it's a work in progress. If you do have that problem, whether you're living off the Merit or off 95, talk to us. We'll see what we can do to help you.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to bring that up.
Please, definitely, please bring that up. There were actually 3 bills that were put through dealing with some of the clear cutting with trees. One went to energy, one went to environment, and one went to transportation, and only one made it out of committee, and that's the one that's in transportation, which we are both on, which is nice. Unfortunately, the bill got switched around. Some of the one that I proposed was the one that went into energy, and the idea behind it was to look at the appeal process by which trees are cut, so that more people have a say in whether the trees can be cut or not. The one that went through with transportation now, it is going to be looking at if it makes it to the floor, if we pass it out. It will be looking at some of the decibel increases and the reduction of trees. There seems to be some discrepancy on how loud it can really be by the roadways. I know a lot of times they were, during testimony, there was discussion on, it really isn't that much of an increase of decibels, but if you're standing at this family's house, you know how loud it is. So that's one of the things it's going to look at. It's also looking at creating sound barriers along the transportation, and then net zero tree loss, which again I know is going to be that's a big ticket item. So that'll be hard to take. But transportation was a very busy year, and with a lot of the roadway fatalities, we were definitely pushing through some ideas with the Vision Zero, and there was a wrong way driving bill that went through. Education.
So I just want to,
Yes.
so Tracy, this is Tracy's first term. She has hit the ground running. I've been here for 6 terms. And I will tell you, she's so much more organized than I am. And she has really been an amazing asset for Darien up in Hartford. I will tell you, Terry Wood was the best. And Tracy's hit the ground running, and it's been amazing working with her. So I'm pleased to representing part of Darien. But
You just like my note cards.
I do like your note cards. And I do want to say one thing, sorry. Darien did beat New Canaan today. The girls lacrosse beat
I wasn't going to
New
mention
Canaan.
that.
Let's not clap too loud, but so
I
do
did see
represent-
that, and I wasn't going to mention it.
So I figured I gotta give you some props, but we're looking forward to get through what you've got, some of your cards
Yep,
there,
yep.
and then we'll answer questions.
Yeah, no, I'll go through this kind of quickly. Education, I know that neither Darien nor New Canaan see too much, but do I have any of my Rowayton folks in here by any chance? No, I thought a couple of them were coming. So we're looking at fully funding the ECS funding, so anybody that's involved in education and education funding will know that that's a big ticket item. Along with that, they are looking at approving more charter schools and adding that into the ECS funding model as well. Some of the other bills, some of the other asks across the state, we're looking at early childhood and how we can support some of our early childhood facilities with the high cost, the low cost of payment for those teaching in the early childhood facilities, and just the struggle to make sure that we can get our workforce out there again, because we've got a lot of parents that aren't able to join the workforce because of the early childhood care.
One thing I'll add that make you upset, if I'm pretty confident this will make you angry. So I think everybody would agree that our cities, the education system is failing. I mean, there's no dispute about it. New Haven was missing 6,000 students during COVID. They just couldn't find them. And so the educational gap between Darien and New Canaan actually handled it very well, in my humble opinion. I know, and so our kids missed a little bit of the beat, but barely, whereas the cities got decimated. They're not anywhere near grade level in any category. So we had the two new members of the teachers union, head of the teachers union. Guess what their 2 big asks are coming out of COVID? Guess what their 2 big asks are as the head of the teachers union? Number 1, raises. Thank you, Chris. And number 2, more time off. I said, what? That's outrageous. So one of the things that as the minority party, have been pushing for years has been trying to get more money for charter schools that Tracy was just talking about. And the charter schools are doing very well. Do you know, now Colby Cathedral is not a charter school, it's a Catholic school in Bridgeport. They've got a 100% graduation rate. And it costs them $9,000 to educate a child. The tuition is less than $9,000. At Bridgeport, they get $22,000, I believe, per student, if not $24,000 per student. So for half, and by the way, what is it, 40% graduation rate, or 50% graduation rate? Whereas Colby's 100%. So I said to the 2 union members, new union members, I said, we can all agree we're failing, right? So after their ask, I said, okay, so Einstein definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again, expecting different result. I'm for all about the money follows the child. Arizona's done it, Colorado's done it, it's been very, very effective. They were absolutely adamantly opposed to it. I said, okay, then give me something else besides raises for the teachers and more time off for the teachers. And guess how much they've given me since? 0. So anyway, I just want to, it's kind of frustrating.
I'm really excited about, there's a bipartisan excitement about charter schools and VOAG schools and making sure they get funded. As we sat in the education committee, the amount of kids that came from VOAG and so eloquently spoken and so enthusiastic about their school, and knowing that they get funded at a fraction as some of the other public schools. We know we need to focus there because we know we are giving kids school choice. On that note, shall we go ahead and bring up we'll move on to housing now, and we have two ladies here from CT 169 Strong, which is an advocate group for grassroots for planning and zoning, and looking at, I can pop you into this, and looking at some of the top-down pushes for the one-size-fits-all planning and zoning. So both, we've got Maria Weingarten, who lives in New Canaan and lived there for 23 years. She's a realtor, but she's also a member of the Board of Finance and has a degree in accounting and finance. And she has been a very strong advocate and a great friend to Darien, so we really appreciate her being here. Alexis Harrison is in Fairfield, and she has her degree in political science and has been in journalism and in TV places across the state, really. And let's see, remind me, you are now on planning and zoning in Fairfield, and has jumped right in and very meticulous about their details on some of the stats, and they've really done lots of deep dives in this, and they've been a friend to us because we are not on planning and development or housing, so we really have appreciated their help. So I will turn it over to them to let them go through some of the bills.
Can you hear me? Okay. Again, my name's Alexis Harrison, and Maria and I co-founded CT 169 Strong in late 2020. We saw a number of bills coming through the legislature that would essentially take away local control of our zoning. You know, I'm on the zoning board in Fairfield, and one of the best things I love about it is hearing from the...
It's just loud.
Oh, sorry. Okay. How's that? Better? Okay, thank you. In any case, we know the best way to make local decisions is from people who live in the communities, our local stewards of our land. And I became involved in zoning is because of the environment. Our local zoning boards actually act as mini EPAs. We can be the first lines of defense when it comes to protecting our natural resources, and we certainly don't want to cede that control to someone in Hartford who may have never stepped in our town, who don't know our land and the nuances of our community. So once again, this session, we've seen a number of bills that take away our local control. Many of them call for density in our communities, building thousands of housing units in the name of affordable housing. But unfortunately, these don't really create much affordability in our communities, just density. And I know Darien has done a great job around our train station. Some of these would call for a lot of apartment buildings around our train stations. And again, we just want to make sure local stakeholders are involved with the decision making. So here we are once again in the session. And I just want to say many of these bills are being pushed by housing advocates, by special interests, and no one has a seat at the table who's working in the field, working in zoning, environmentalists, engineers, economists. So it's really being pushed by one side, and we're really trying to break through that and have a dialogue with legislators. So I will turn it over to Maria, who's going to talk through some of the bills, and we're here to answer any questions that you may have tonight. Thank you. And I do want to thank Tom and Tracy. They've been great advocates for your communities in Hartford. They've really been on the front lines, and we really appreciate their partnership.
I would say that one of the greatest concerns that we have is that we find that a lot of the news media are not letting everybody know what's in the bills. They'll, say, oh, there's this bill, and they'll say, oh, and it's an opt-in, and then they don't tell you about some of the onerous aspects of the bill. So when we have legislators that are willing to step up and put those out in this, so I really appreciate that both of you have done that and put that out there, because we're not seeing that consistently done by all of the legislators. So I want to thank you guys for doing that. So we'll talk a little bit about the bills that that we have found are concerning. I'll start with the most onerous one to start, and that's the Fair Share Bill. So the Fair Share Bill has been described as the largest unfunded mandate on municipalities since education. And the trick here is that OLR, or the group that would decide and let you know what the cost might be, they're not going to quantify the cost that it's going to impact towns. They're only looking to do it for what the state impact is. Now, the fair share says that you are going to be assigned a fair share, that there's some outside group that's decided what that is, and you will have to build that fair share, and you will have to build that fair share within 10 years. And if you don't have, so you have two options. You can either build it yourself And we know that building costs about $650,000 a unit to build the high-density multifamily that we're talking about, between the costs of land and the costs of all of the restrictions and guidelines and things that must be followed. We have spoken to a number of people who are involved in this industry who do it from Maine to New York, and they say it's about $650,000 a unit. So that's a very high cost. So for example, for Darien, that would be $1,271 is your fair share, of which if you had a developer who you wanted to have build that for you, where they have them do the 20% as the affordable part and 80% is their market value, that means you'd have to add 6,355 units to your current housing stock, which is essentially about an 88% increase in what your current housing stock is. And what you're adding is multifamily rental market value units for the most part. So, these things do have impacts on your community, your infrastructure, whether you can handle that. So these are the concerns really that sort of overlay in all of these bills, where they're trying to push high density, they're trying to push just rentals development, which is not a path to home ownership, which again is really what everybody looks to. It's the American dream. I mean, my parents came from Europe, my father had to escape communism. I think that's a dream for everybody, to have home ownership. And so that's really the underlying issue with many of these bills. So that's fair share. If you don't build your fair share, which is at a high cost, and if a developer doesn't come in and do it, then you will go to default zoning, which means that anywhere where there's town water, town sewer, it would be 20 units per acre, can go up right next to you. If you're in anywhere that's on septic and water, it's as much as multifamily as the property can bear. So again, it takes away any sort of ability to know what may end up happening to whatever is next to you. And so it's concerning. It's not a good bill, and we think it should just go away somewhere and not come back. So that's...
It also allows an interested party to sue. So in other words, a developer can sue the town if you don't meet your fair share, which by the way is impossible for anybody to meet generally. And they can sue an interested party. So another developer can sue the town, hey, they didn't follow, so I want to be paid, I want to get money and put in development. I mean, it's crazy.
So when we say interested party, it's housing advocates, and so that's who makes out in this. It's housing advocates, it's attorneys, and it's the developers, because they can sue for damages and they can sue for enforcement, and so you still have to build it. And this only exists really significantly in New Jersey, where it is very high cost there as well to live. So it hasn't really made life more...
It has not solved any issues in New Jersey, and I don't think we want to model anything in Connecticut after New Jersey. No offense to New Jersey. And I would also say it's also on top of 830G. Unfortunately, Tom's bills did not go forward, so we're not even fixing 830G. I know we've been all hit hard, especially in Fairfield County with 830G, so we're not even fixing this policy, which has pretty much failed us. So it's, I just want you to know that.
So that was a long discussion on that one. I'll move a little faster, I promise. So housing authority jurisdiction, another bill that came out of where they would like to have an outside housing authority be able to build in any other town. The original version of this bill said that without the permission of the town they're going to go into. So New Haven's housing authority, Elm City Communities, is very interested in doing so. Elm City and New Haven Housing Authority receive 7,500 vouchers that they would be happy, and I guess maybe they have an over allocation, I'm not sure why, but they want to now be able to go and build elsewhere to do this. And so the bill was changed, so now you have to have permission, and we're making sure, we're watching closely to make sure it doesn't get changed, but you now have to have permission of the town that they want to go into. Now, Elm City is also, the Karen Dubois Walton, who is the head of that, also has Glendower Group, that's a nonprofit group that does development of this, actually redevelopment of affordable. So if people need that technical experience, terrific, go ahead. And you can hire them to do that. But I think to have an outside housing authority competing with your own housing authority, when you have two public entities competing against developing affordable in your own town, to me makes very little sense.
I've represented the Bridgeport Housing Authority in a number of lawsuits. Believe me, you don't want them building anything anywhere.
Okay, all right. So we'll move on then. So now we're going to talk about Work, Live, Ride. So Work, Live, Ride was the desegregate bill, HB 6890, and this bill basically sets up a zoning czar that's going to come in and it sort of sets a guideline for how many units of density they want around a half mile around a train station. And they say it's in collaboration, but it says about 22 times that it's this coordinator is the one who decides. So decides the density, decides whether you have parking or not, and it's like you can't have excessive parking, you can't have excessive lot size, you can't have excessive, and again, it's always this outside coordinator. It lacks the coordination that we would want to see with the towns who actually are the boots on the ground who understand what works best for their communities. So we are not in favor of this bill at all, and the real issue there is a lot of what's been in the press that it is a opt-in bill. Well, it's not an opt-in when any town that decides not to opt in, because you don't know what you're getting really when you're doing this, anybody who doesn't opt in is deprioritized for any infrastructure, discretionary infrastructure spending. So it is an opt-in with a very big stick. So we do not recommend that this bill move forward.
Yeah, and I would add to that the town of Easton. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Easton. It's a farming community. They have about 1.5 stoplights. They would actually be considered a transit adjacent community, so they would actually could opt into this bill if they wanted to. But they don't have any sewer. They don't have the infrastructure. So I just, it's sad that, this bill could, certainly destroy, communities and the fabric of our unique towns. So we're very troubled by this bill.
So there are only 6 towns in the quiet corners, the upper parts of the state, that are not next to a town that has either a bus stop or a train station. Those are the only ones that are not impacted by this bill. So it really has a wide breadth of concern for a lot of communities. So hopefully this bill will also not move forward. They did take funding out of the budget. Originally, the governor had put money into the budget for this, and it's since been removed. So we're hoping that that's a signal that maybe they are moving in a different direction. So then we'll talk about the governor's bill. So the governor's bill is a true opt-in bill, and we thought that there were some really good aspects of it. It did make some changes that we thought would make some communities less likely to participate. So what we have done is made suggestions when we spoke with people in the governor's office to make some amendments to the bill to make it more amenable to a lot of communities, such as removing the as-of-right mandates, to allow for special permits to be done whenever there's a mixed-use development, because those are all unique and have different impacts. So it makes sense to have all of your normal boards be able to react to those concerns, anything that is unique to that individual project. They also made the Zoning Board of Appeals be the main source for approval, and took away all approvals from planning and zoning, sewer, historical preservation, wetlands, water conservation, which we don't agree with. We think it's really important that those things remain as they are, because they are, as Alexis said, the true stewards of property. They also removed any off-street parking requirement, which we know doesn't work everywhere. So there are communities where roads are wide and it makes a lot of sense, where you can have on-street parking and you wouldn't want to have excessive, the thought being that if you have extra parking requirements, it makes a project more expensive. So the thought being that if you can remove the extra, don't have too much, then it would make it more appealing and cost less. But the reality is that people do need cars. We do not live in New York City, and we need cars to get to our schools, to get to our doctor's appointments, to get to our kids' after-school activities. So it doesn't make sense to assume that everybody can just do transit and that they will be without a need for a car, and so that's another thing that has to be removed and amended. And then the last part is, I know you guys in Darien have an inclusionary policy, as we do in New Canaan, and that's because our land value is high, and that when developers come in, they will build high-end because they can make more profit that way, obviously. So when these bills come out and say you can't have more than 10% affordable on a project or whatever, it makes no sense in our communities, where we've tried to account for the fact that when developers come in, they tend to build high-end, and we want to make sure that we have enough affordable that's part of our projects. So our suggestion there is to make sure that we do include that within the bills. And so then the only last two bills, I swear, we're going to be done in a minute here. There's HB 6781, and that was the majority leader, the House Majority Leader's bill, Senator Rojas, and he had proposed changes to 830J to address equity in housing and social assets and report demographic and segregation data sets. So unfortunately, this kind of singles out communities to try to analyze where people are living and then sort of artificially segregate them again till if they don't like the way they're living. So like if you have a community that has more of a Brazilian community in Danbury or another area, they would want to try to like change that. Or let's say you're in a quiet corner and you want more young people to move in. Our town's going to be forced now to build bars and like have a evening social life. It just doesn't really make sense to people are living and making choices as to where do they live based on where they are in their lives. And I think that it doesn't make a lot of sense to lay it out that way. And I think the focus should be more on working and collaborating with communities to make sure that we can create affordable and find ways for the state to help our towns when we are trying to do that. So there's also vouchers. There's a wait list reform on there. We would rather see more reforms on vouchers, not just wait list reforms, but really taking a look at one of, I think, the greatest issues we have is the fact that our communities in Fairfield County are impacted by the fact that we live very close proximity to New York. We are impacted by that metro New York market. So, and we benefit from that. It means our salaries end up being higher, but it means there's also a greater disparity in wages here. It also means that our rental costs are higher and our property values are higher. We're not getting a really fair shake when it comes to how many vouchers, because I would agree that there are definitely people who are struggling right now with the increase in inflation that's happened and everything, so we should be doing more, and I think they may have to reassess the way they allocate vouchers, and I don't think anyone's really ever talked that much about this, but I think it's really important that we start talking about it and start pressing for really, if they're talking about equity, let's be equitable about how we do these things, and provide projects and provide vouchers to our towns when we do affordable, because we're not getting those either as part of our projects. And go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say, I know we threw a lot at you, but I want you to know, we are an all-volunteer group, and we do this basically all day when we're not doing our day job. So we're on the ground fighting along with these guys. So I want you to know we are trying, but we also need your help as well. So you take one of these before you leave, and there's lots of information. Go to our website, and urge you to help us.
So I'll take questions just a second, just to let you know that we did speak out for these bills, in particular with the transit-oriented community bill, the Live, Work, Ride bill. Yeah, that's focused around train stations, and you know how many train stations we have here. They did not specify whether it would just be one train station in this bill. It could be any of them, all of them. And they didn't specify whether these train stations, if they did or did not have large roads around them. So that was one of the things that I really pushed back on in housing. So on that note, I would like to take questions. We are on, just so you know, we have TV 79 here. And so in order for TV 79 to hear you, you have to have a microphone. So I can come around and... You want to do that? Oh, delightful.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew's going to pass out microphones.
Of the 169 towns and cities in the state, how many are in favor of this type of housing legislation and how many are against it?
I don't think we have an exact number, but we have done outreach to all corners of the state, and we're trying to connect with P&Z, selectmen, mayors, so they're aware of this, because the press has not covered any of this. And I'm sure many of your legislators are not putting that much out there either.
I can tell you the cities are in favor, and then the more rural towns are opposed, and the smaller towns.
And in the legislature, the cities outvote the towns?
So what the push is that the cities want to have more expansion of housing into the smaller communities. So that's what you're seeing, and that's why you're seeing these bills.
And where does the governor stand on this sort of thing?
Where does it go to?
No, the governor, what's he thinking about this?
So the governor, everybody admits the 830G hasn't worked in Fairfield County. In fact, I had Q. Williams, who unfortunately passed away, but we had worked on a bipartisan bill to fix 830G. And so we've been, unfortunately, it didn't go out of committee this year, but I'm confident, based on my discussions, that there are going to be positive fixes to 830G going forward. The governor
is on record on the Lisa Wexler show is saying he is for local control for housing and local control for education.
Yeah, I'm sorry. He says he's for more local control.
He is for local control of housing and local control of education. He's on record on the Lisa Wexler show was saying that, yes.
And he actually lauded the communities for doing the hard work of creating, diversity of housing. He said that last Friday, so we're very pleased to see that.
And to be clear, this doesn't necessarily seem to be a party divide like Tom just mentioned. It's like Westport, we've got a Democrat who's representing that, and he stood up strong against these. That's just not going to work for Westport. They're working really hard at trying to get affordable housing up in their community, and the fair share just wipes it all out and makes them start afresh. So, okay.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Sini.
Thanks for doing this evening. You alluded to the fact this town's had inclusionary zoning since 2009. I think the former first selectman that helped pass it is in the room. But what we're finding, at least what I'm seeing, is ignorance, or maybe even willful ignorance, out of Hartford on some of the initiatives we've done down here. I mean, you look at the transit-oriented development that's been passed, and we have been incredibly progressive for a very small town in terms of diversifying its housing, going as far as seeing a developer create housing for adults with special needs, affordable housing with special needs. So I guess the big question that I have is, how do we get the word out? I mean, there's a brilliant article of David Lehman, the former Connecticut Department of Economic Development, coming down and at the groundbreaking ceremony at Corbin District, and he basically outlined it as what all towns need to have, and that's that plan that's you're seeing play out in front of our eyes. But how do we get more press, more awareness? Because I think the state could benefit greatly by following our lead on some of this stuff.
I absolutely agree. I'm very proud to talk about Darien when I'm in front of the Housing Committee, and it's very easy for me to say, Darien wants you to come down, and I did. I said, please come to Darien, please see what we're doing there, and I know Tom feels the same about New Canaan. They're working hard there as well. Hopefully we can get some good press out of this. We do have some people here tonight that maybe will write about some of the amazing things that we're doing in Darien, and I will keep pushing the word out. Oh, sorry, thank you. I will keep pushing the word out for sure, because you're right. We have a lot to be proud of here. We've got communities that are coming up that are basically what everyone else is wanting to do. They keep saying, let's do these transit-oriented communities, and I say, come to Darien, come see how it's done. This is a lovely way to do it.
And I, as I said, I went and visited with Q. Williams over the summer in Middletown. That's where he's from. And we spent a couple hours talking and visiting and going back and forth with some ideas. And then I had him in New Canaan for 4 hours, touring all around. And I showed him how we've renovated every single affordable housing unit in the last 15 years. We've doubled our affordable housing stock. We were the first municipality to have a fund created from an extra fee on the building permits to create affordable housing. And we were like the third or fourth to get a moratorium, and we should have gotten our second moratorium. So to your point, we just need to do more outreach. The press has done us no favors. Mm-hmm. They frankly have vilified New Canaan in particular on a number of occasions, and it was out of ignorance. They certainly didn't quote me or ask me questions on it. So we need to try and do a better job, but the press isn't helping us, but we're making some progress.
We're finding actually to come on Twitter now. So when they put out stories now, we're actually hitting them with facts. So if you want to join us and put facts out about your communities, and we're doing it about our communities and giving actual factual information, because that's really what's lacking. And and Tom's right. I mean, Westport's everyone's doing unique things, and they're sort of saying that this is an elite issue, and they're making this into a class warfare thing, because this is what they do. When you can't talk about the bills because there are bad things in there, you just have to kind of kill the messenger, right? So they've been attacking us. They've been attacking anybody who talks about this, and the reality is that because we are Fairfield County, and because there's more money to be made here because of the high property values, we're the early adopters and the ones who first see what's happening and recognize it. So we're the ones who, when we see these bills coming down, we're the ones who are saying, wait a minute, this is not going to work. This is not going to solve the problems. And if you don't look at these things comprehensively and understand that there's a very different market in New Haven and in Hartford, which is more of a lagging market because of economic downturn, quite frankly. And so you have to kind of recognize the difference in the markets, and you have to have comprehensive solutions, and that's what's missing. And you're absolutely right. They are not talking to the stakeholders. Our main thing that we always say is you need your local stakeholders to be involved in this process, because they are the boots on the ground. They're the ones who understand best how to fix problems. So to create committees that are just stacked to have a predetermined outcome, which is what they have, it's frustrating. And to hear these great P&Z officials who are Democrats, who we talk to often, Danielle Dobbin from Westport, Margarita Albin from Greenwich, both Democrats, but both are very honest and tell the truth about what's going on and what's going to work and what's not going to work. And I think they need to do more listening than just, mandating, and they need to stop listening to these housing advocates that are backed by RPA and big outside dark money. That's really what's happening. You've got paid for advocates, whether it's a housing advocate group, whether it's a student who just shows up and gets grants from their college to be an advocate and to testify. Like, that's what we're up against.
Yeah, and I just do want to touch on the media part, because you bring up an interesting point. There's actually the Melville Trust. They actually give grants to papers like the CT Mirror, I think $50,000 to a housing reporter to sway public opinion. It's out there. It's on our website. NPR and a host of other outlets. I don't want to mention any, I just want to make sure I have them accurately. So it is hard to get a fair shake in the media. So that's why we have our website. We put out newsletters. So come to our website, get the facts.
Questions?
Questions?
I've got a couple education questions. First, what is happening with ECS? Then, how about free food or free lunch for all, which isn't really free?
Yes.
And then the funding for HVAC improvements in the schools. It was mandated that we all have inspections, but there aren't enough vendors to go around, and there isn't enough funds to go around.
Okay. So particularly in the ECS funding, that was passed out of committee, that the actual formula didn't necessarily change, but who was getting the ECS funding did change. So if this moves through how it came out of committee, which may or may not. Previously, it was whatever you qualified, the public school got it. And then if you were going to a VOAG school, there would be a chargeback, or VOAG would get a little bit, but then they would charge the public school for some of it. Or if you were in a charter school, you would get a stipend from the government that was about half of what the public school would get. But now it is putting everybody on the same level, the VOAG, the charter, and the public school. Previously, with the formula, it would calculate it out, but the schools were only getting partial. It was like a yearly increase until I think maybe 2025. It was going to hit full funding, but the ARPA funds came in. If I could be wrong about the federal funds that came down made the schools fully funded recently. Now, since those are going to be gone, the ECS funding is going to be moved to 100%. So that is a good thing, not necessarily, again, for Darien, because Darien doesn't. Yeah. So there's no changing in that. Like I said, the formula is the same. But the exciting thing is the charter schools, because still looking at school choice, I think, is a great thing for many communities. I know Norwalk may get funded for a charter school. We might be having one in Bridgeport. We might be having one in Danbury. We're waiting to see how all that plays out.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, yeah.
In the HVAC funding, there was 51 million that the governor announced, a week ago, and I was just down in Stanford at a school where they're getting about $1 million for their HVAC improvements. I don't think Darien and New Canaan are going to qualify, but
I'm working from, it'll take us at least 10 million. It's a drop in the ocean, and the maintenance, inspections, and air quality can't be met.
yeah.
Got it, okay. So the free lunch that you were discussing, let's be very clear that we had one bill that we just put through, the one that Tom was just talking about, where we put the guardrails on all of our financial, which is amazing, but in order to pass that through, we had to pass through the free school lunches. It was all in the same bill.
Will that go into 23, 24? I know it's extended from March 1st to the end of this school year.
I don't know, actually.
Yeah, it's intended to go through to 23, 24, yes. Yes, they're intended, the free lunch, so to speak. There's never such thing as a free lunch, except in Connecticut. No, but it is planning on going through to 23, 24.
Could you use your microphone?
The Science of Reading program that has been thought to be mandated will cost each district approximately $500,000. What is the status of that right now?
It's a delayed start. They're not going to be implementing it this year, and I think they're going to be adding some. We've got a bill coming through that may have a little bit of a fix to it. It still is probably going to move through, but it's not. It's going to be a delayed implementation, and they're giving towns options to opt out of it as well.
What if the district has a better program than the Science of Reading?
They've already been allowed a chance to opt out. So I think everybody that wanted to opt out has worked with the State Board of Ed and done so. Darien is one of them that did opt out. And they will find out in August if they get the opt-out. Yes.
Good evening. Thanks so much for doing this tonight. I really appreciate it. Just in terms of families that choose to move into New Canaan and Darien, the school systems are obviously a very important component and factor in why people choose to live in these areas. Could you just talk a little bit and help me understand a little bit about the increased volume in the towns in terms of population through these zoning rules and the effect on the education systems?
So the question is, what will the impact be on the educational system with this influx of all this housing? And so basically, that's one of the reasons why some of these affordable housing plans or proposals get defeated, because there just isn't the infrastructure to support them. That said, I don't want to, so New Canaan right now is in the midst of litigation over one project right now and another one in the pipeline. So I don't want to get into too much of the weeds, but clearly there is a concern that if you have the dramatic increase that Maria was talking about, where you're going to increase Darien's stock by 88% or 6,000 units, that's going to adversely impact, you're going to have to have more buses, you're going to have more schools, and it's not practical. New Canaan's already 99% developed. I don't know, I think Darien's close, if not more, the same, 98, 99%. And so you're just going to be going up, and the infrastructure can't handle it. So to answer your question, that's one of the arguments that's been made. The only way you really can fight it from an infrastructure standpoint is sewer capacity.
And again, it goes back to how ECS is an issue for towns like ours. So is capital improvements related to education, to school buildings. Again, something that 10 to 20% is the most that we get as a reimbursement. It's nice when a city gets an entirely brand-new school. I mean, I think sometimes taking my daughter around to a lot of these different towns for competitive sports, I was like, wow, those are great new schools. Like, we just renovate when we can and what we can afford, you know, but it's a very different treatment there.
So I don't know if you've watched any of our meetings that had in town where you've got the Board of Ed, you've got Planning and Zoning, and you've got Board of Finance, you've got our first selectman. There are very controlled discussions on when buildings come up, what's the possibility there's going to be children in there, how many children are coming in, and which school they'll go to. So I know that discussion would be very hard when it's as of right, but so that's why we are pushing back on this. But knowing that our towns are very concerned, we do have very good schools, and we want to make sure that they stay that way. Yeah. Questions?
Yes, switching gears, thanks everyone for this evening and this presentation. One, if you could talk briefly about what you know and where we stand with early voting, which we all know was passed by the residents of Connecticut on the last ballot. And secondly, in the Environment Committee, Tom, you addressed House Bill 6611 on the dog licenses. I understand you were not in favor of it. I just wanted to understand a little bit more. There's legislation concerning dog licensing, which will affect everyone, nonpartisan. If you could share a little bit more about that.
So my understanding on that bill, that was a cost issue. From what I understand, it was not going to be a decrease in cost. I flagged that bill because if they can guarantee me that as part of it, doing it online, they're going to save money, then I'm all for it. I think we're trying to negotiate so they wanted to raise the fee to allow it to go much higher. And I said, listen, I'm in favor of online dog licensing, but I don't want it to be just another revenue source for the general fund.
There are two prices for different types of dogs. They were just going to create one price.
Right.
So.
And my understanding was they wanted to do that because it'll generate more money. And the idea was, I said I want to create a savings for taxpayers, not an increase. So I'm in favor of it, but I want to keep the same structure so that we're not having everybody paying, or a lot of people paying more.
Okay.
But yeah, so. And look, it's a 5 of 8. I don't know if that's working. Yeah, it's 5 of, but we're happy to stay and answer questions. I want to try and get everybody have an opportunity to ask questions.
Early
so.
voting.
Early voting, yes.
You were gonna answer that.
So right now, the debate is going on how early. So we're going to have, we've already passed the constitutional amendment to have no excuse absentee balloting, okay? In my mind, no excuse absentee balloting, yes. So you don't have to have an excuse to turn in an absentee ballot. What's that? So that was passed, no excuse absentee balloting. It was passed last session. So that you don't have to, right now you have to either be, you're going to be out of state. You have to have a reason to vote absentee. So the no excuse absentee balloting, to me, that's going to make it easier to vote early, right? I'm concerned about the cost. So one proposal is that you could vote up to a week or 2 early. I'm trying to pull out the early voting bill.
It's 10 to, I think it's
between
10 or 14 days right now is what it is.
And then there was another proposal. So there's 3 early voting bills. One of them is basically 2 weeks early. One is having the 11th day before an election and the 2nd day before an election being able to vote early. I will tell you my concern about early voting is that if it's too early, things can change. And I don't want people voting a month in advance and then all of a sudden stuff comes out and you can't take your ballot back. So, and so the no excuse absentee balloting, I think, gives everybody the opportunity to vote early. And they don't need, so the big issue is if we have early voting for a week or 2 in advance, it's going to be very expensive for municipalities. And so that's a cost. And so, look, if you can't get there on election day, then do a no excuse absentee ballot in my mind. I'm not a big fan of early voting, but I know it's a hot topic and I'm probably wrong on it because a lot of people tell me I'm wrong on that issue, but I just think I would rather have no excuse absentee balloting than early voting, if that makes sense. Correct, it already, yes, and we voted to put it on the ballot.
Do you mind if I share the news from the Registrar of Voters meeting? Is that, yeah. So my understanding, I've been in touch with our Registrar of Voters who meets regularly with the Secretary of State. And it sounds like even if it does go through, that they will not be able to implement it this year. It will not be until next year that it will be implemented, just because of some of the software that they would have to implement. So not something to worry about for this fall, but we will be seeing it at some point.
Back to the competing budget proposals, what are the biggest differences in the budgets, and which interest groups are backing what?
So the question is, what are the biggest differences between the governor's budget, the House Democrats' budget, the Senate Democrat budget, and the House and the Senate Republicans were coming out with it next, or basically tomorrow or the next day. The biggest difference, so I can't tell you specifically everything that's different, but I can tell you the biggest difference is the amount of the tax cuts. So the Republican tax cuts are double what the proposal is currently from the governor. The House Dems have not, I haven't seen exactly what their proposal is yet in much detail. They're less of a tax cut than the governor's proposal, and I haven't seen the Senate Dems yet.
I meant on the spending side.
On the spending side. I will tell you there's not a whole lot of difference on the spending side. Most of the difference is on the savings on the tax side and how they're implemented. The spending side is not that big of a difference, believe it or not.
We'll take, if there's one more question, we'll take it, and then Tom and I are happy to hang around for a little bit.
Hi, thanks for being here. I know there was a little bit of adjustments that they were thinking about making to the Family Medical Leave Act, and curious to see if anything came out of committee on that, on whether or not they're going to be changing the guidelines on which companies need to start to opt in to have their employees eligible for family medical leave.
So the question is, have any legislation come out that's fixed the Paid Family Medical Leave Act? And the short answer is I don't think so. I will tell you, so Connecticut passed the most comprehensive paid family medical leave program in the country. So you, basically, you're eligible to have paid leave, a lot, by the way. It's up to $600 a week. And it's for going to take care of, like the federal program is you take care of immediate family. It's unpaid in the federal program, and it's limited to employers of 50 or more, because they realize small businesses can't afford to have their employees leaving for nothing, or for a period of time. So imagine if you run a 4-person office, and 2 of your key people want to go take care of a close family friend, because under the Connecticut paid leave program, it doesn't have to be an immediate family member. You can go take care of a close personal friend in Florida every spring break. And it's just wrong, because if you've got an office of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 and your 2 paralegals that do all your closings take 13 weeks to go take care of a close personal friend in Florida, your business is in trouble. Has anybody tried to get temporary workers that are good? It's not easy. So my long-winded answer to you is I'm unaware of any legislation that's come out to fix that problem. I had asked them to raise it to 50 employers of 50 or more. We still don't have every single company is still not complying with the 0.5% of money taken out of every paycheck. So there's a number of companies that still aren't even doing that. You're all paying for it, by the way. Everybody's paying for this paid family leave, but if everybody took it, it would be bankrupt. If only actually 1 out of 25 people took it, it would be bankrupt. But in any event, I'm happy to talk to you more about it offline afterwards, but it needs to be fixed, you're right.
All right. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. Really appreciate you being here. If you're not on our mailing list, then please sign up out there.
I've got probably 3 hours worth of really bad stuff we can talk about.
Yeah, I got a few things too. So.
And we'll just. And we just want to put a shameless plug for ourselves, ct169strong.org We have all of these bills in nauseating detail in there, so.
Please go to 169.
Donate, get involved. We need volunteers. We are, like we said, volunteers. We don't get paid for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.